What's going on, everybody? 2v8 mode is back for a fourth time in Dead by Daylight, and I am super excited. We now have Oni and Ghostface added to the killer roster for a total of 13 killer choices in this mode now. It's getting much bigger. And so I wanted to take some time to recognize some of the skill trees in this mode. As you know, we don't have any perks, we have classes, and we've already made a video going over that, so if you haven't seen that, go back and watch it. But today, we're going to be talking about the skills, which are basically the add-ons that you get in this mode, since you don't get to bring any items for Survivor, and you don't get to bring any offerings or add-ons either. So what we have is skills, which is basically similar, and I wanted to go over this with you guys so you can get a better understanding of what you're really getting in each killer's kit. So starting with Trapper here, the first thing that you need to note is that Trapper normally starts the trial with 2 traps in his hand, and he can only hold up to a maximum of 2. And he also has 10 traps around the map. For some reason, though, in this mode, he only has 8 traps that spawn in the trial grounds, which I think is weird, considering that the maps are bigger in this mode, and now he gets 2 less traps to use in total, which I think is very, very weird, especially considering that he can hold more. Essentially, the 2 extra traps is basically equivalent to the old Trapper Sack. The closest comparable thing to this now is the Trapper Bag add-on, although that only adds 1 extra trap on hand, so this really isn't equivalent to anything currently in game, so just think of it like the old Trapper Sack. Also, Trapper cannot be caught in his own traps. This is equivalent to the makeshift wraps. It is not noted in this description whether or not he disarms them by walking over them, but I do believe that's still the case. However, your teammate can also walk over them, but do not disarm them. He also gets the increased haste bonus after setting a trap. That has been increased to 15%, however. The add-on that creates this effect is the Coffee Grounds. However, the Coffee Grounds only adds a 12.5% buff, and this is a 15% buff. So it's slightly better than the Coffee Grounds. The increased bear trap setting speed by 50% and the increased time required to escape a bear trap by 25% are both direct one-to-one comparisons of the fastening tools. That does both of those, the same percentages in that description. Moving on to Wraith. Decreased cloaking speed and uncloaking time by 22%. This is both of the swift hunts, both the blood and the white, that makes that 22%. So the white is 10%, and the blood is 12%, and those two stacked together for the uncloak time make that 22%. But you could also say it's a bit of a weaker blink mud for the cloak speed. That I believe is 60%, so we could say it's a weaker version of that for the cloak time, but they just gave it 22 for both of them and called it a day. So it's pretty similar to that. The increased movement speed while cloaked by 9%, that's exactly the same as the Windstorm Blood. The increased action speed when destroying pallets, breakable walls, destroying generators, and vaulting by 60% when cloaked. That's another direct one-to-one comparison of Shadow Dance Blood. So for the most part here, that's mostly the same. And then moving on to Hillbilly, we see the first killer in this lineup who really didn't get a lot of love as far as add-ons. Hillbilly only got 2 add-on buffs, one of which is the spiked boots, the purple ones, and that gives him the 30% extra turn rate. And then the second is the steel toe boots, which reduce the cooldown when he runs into an object during his chainsaw sprint. However, he didn't even get the full thing. Or rather, he got the weaker of the 2 add-ons that decrease this, which I thought if he would only get 2 add-ons, he would at least get the stronger of each, which he did get it for the spike boots, which is more impactful, but he got the weaker of the 2 add-ons. It's not quite exactly the same. The steel toe boots actually reduced it by 10%, and they gave us slightly more at 12, but I don't know why they were afraid to give us the better one on that one. I don't know. It's not like, I mean, a good Bubba's not even going to bump into anything that often. And then you take a look at Nurse, and she has 7 buffs. I repeat, 7 buffs. And I don't know why. She's the strongest killer in the game, and for some reason, they were afraid to overbuff Billy, but then they give Nurse 7 buffs. Literally none of these is a nerf at all. So I don't understand, but whatever. We're going to go through one by one. Increased duration of blink attack lunges by 30%. This is referring to the actual swing after you come out of a blink and the length of that lunge. So picture like a coup de grace or something like that, or an All Shaking Thunder, where the actual distance that you lunge after the blink, that's what we're talking about. That is reduced by 30%. That is a direct one-to-one of the heavy panting. Now the next one, increased reach by 30% on the second blink. We're not talking about the lunge again. We're talking about the distance that you traveled during the second blink, the maximum distance that is possible for you to travel in the blink, not including any lunge before or after. That range has been increased by 30%. And as far as I could tell, there is not a single add-on that affects this. So this is our first addition here in this mode that is not a direct mimic of an add-on. So that's going to be interesting. We're going to find a couple of more of those later on, so keep your eye out for those. But moving on here, all the rest of these are pretty much one-to-one. Decreased duration from blink fatigue by 7%. That's thanks to her toxic respiration. The decreased fatigue from chain blinks by 65% is from the catatonic boy's treasure. Increased movement speed during a chain blink by 30%. That's the dark cincture. And then the increase the duration of the blink window, chain blink window, by 0.2 seconds. That is the pocket watch. And then decreased fatigue from missing special attacks by 0.5 seconds. That is the wooden horse. So all of these are a direct one-to-one comparison, except for the extra blink distance on the second blink. Huntress starts the trial with 3 extra hatchets than normal. She was recently reworked along with Clown to start with extra hatchets on hand from 5 to 7, and since then they have reworked her add-ons that allow her to start with extra hatchets on each reload. So if you want to look at this like it's the old utility belt that gave you 2 extra hatchets, you could look at it that way, but keep in mind the utility belt now is a haste status effect that doesn't have anything to do with the amount of hatchets, so pretty much this is just adjusted for 2v8 mode. It's not technically an add-on. However, the increased movement speed of 4.5% when out of hatchets is a direct comparison to her soldier's putty. And then the decreased reload time by 20%, that is the deerskin gloves. And then the increased movement speed during windup by 5% is the shiny pin. Alright, Spirit was the first killer where I actually had to do a little bit of math, because these stats that are given here are written differently than the way they're written in the add-on descriptions, so I actually had to go and calculate a little bit to see what this was most similar to. So this first one here, increased duration of Yamoko's haunting by 3 seconds. It is exactly the same amount of time as the Yamoki, I'm probably saying that wrong, Yamoki amulet. With the exception that it does not come with the downside that amulet add-on does come with. So it's exactly the same. The add-on description says reduce the or increase the duration by 15%, which calculates out to 3 seconds. So it's exactly the same. And then the next one, increase Yamoko's haunting cooldown recharge rate by 0.33 seconds. This is referring to the amount of time that your power actually takes to get all the way around the square until you can use it again. And that base kit charge rate is actually 0.33 seconds. So this is now being increased by 0.33 seconds. Some of these are weird, you gotta read them. Sometimes it says increases this to this, and some of them say increased by this. So this is a case of the latter. So this is actually completely doubled. So her recharge rate in this mode is 0.66 charges a second, which this is essentially equivalent to the Broken Watch and the Origami Crane both put together. Both of those increase the recharge rate, so this is essentially both of those put together to get to that. Additionally, the increased phase walk movement speed multiplier by 0.2. This is essentially the Zori, the little sandals, but it's a bit weaker. The Zori actually increases this by 2.5%, and this is 0.2, which is a little bit more than a little bit less. So yeah, not very much of a difference. I think what they were going for here was they wanted her to be able to use her power a lot and get across the map, but not be so fast and chase that it's devastating. And even though Billy only had 2 add-ons, he's still pretty strong in this mode because he can still insta-down. Legion is the first killer that I think was really gypped and had such a fall from grace in a high potential mode that really feels sucky to play sometimes in this mode. Most of this here is just tweaking Legion's base kit to make her compatible for this mode, and she didn't really get any buffs. The only add-on that she got was the Mischief list, or sorry, because it's multiple, whatever. The only add-on the Legion received was the Mischief list, which increases Feral Frenzy duration by literally 1 second. Base kit is 11 seconds, so now she gets 1 second. That's it. That's literally it, and it's a brown add-on. Everything else in this is just to adjust it for 2v8 so that it's compatible. So, as you know, Legion was not all that long ago reworked, where 4 consecutive feral slashes on 4 consecutive survivors that are not in the mending state will continue your power, and then upon the 5th feral slash, you down that survivor whether they're healthy or not. This is just adjusting that to 8 and 9, respectively, because there's now 8 survivors instead of 4. And then the increased terror radius bonus to 20 meters is, again, the same thing. Your terror radius is 8 meters larger when you're in your Feral Frenzy, so instead of 32, as soon as you run into Feral Frenzy, it now becomes 40 meters. This bonus is now 20 instead of 8, so that means you have a 52-meter terror radius in 2v8 when you're using your Feral Frenzy as Legion. I did think that was interesting, but there's not really any benefit. Most of the time, you don't want to have a terror radius. The only thing this helps you with is to help detect other people, but if you or your teammate are running Shadow, you get no terror radius at all, and you can't see any killer instinct. So I just feel like Legion gets countered in every way in this mode, honestly, and had so much potential. So Legion gets 1 brown add-on, and Nurse, who's already strong, gets 7. So I don't know what the devs were thinking, but that's the case with that. Our first new killer in this mode, Ghostface, has a bit of an interesting kit as well. This first part here increases charge rate of Night Shroud by 15%. This is essentially the Walleye's matchbook. And then the next one increases stalking charge rate by 10%. We're not talking about how long it takes for your power to charge and get all the way around the square before you can use it. That is what the first part is talking about. This second line increases stalking charge rate. Even though it's worded strangely, this is referring to the amount of time it takes for you to mark a survivor before they're insta-downable. So normally that takes 4 seconds, I believe. This is essentially the Philly add-on, and it reduces it by just a little bit, about a half a second or so, I believe. And then increased movement speed while Night Shroud is active by 10%. There's actually no direct comparison to this. This is a bit of a tweak. The most similar thing to this is the leather knife sheath. However, that add-on works by increasing your speed by 10% when you're crouched, whether or not you are in your Night Shroud and you're undetectable or not. This one works whether or not you're crouched, specifically when you're in your Night Shroud. So it's a bit of a rework from that. It's a bit different, but I kind of like it. It helps with your mobility in this mode a lot, so I think it's interesting. I'd honestly like to see more add-ons tweaked like this instead of being direct one-to-ones, but I thought it was cool. Next, decreased time when survivors are exposed by 30 seconds. This, again, is not anything direct from an add-on, and it's actually a nerf. And I think the reason that they went with this was because they figured with 2 killers, Ghostface can mark him and either killer can down him, and they didn't want this to be too overpowered with having like 4 or 5 different survivors all being marked for a full minute at a time for both killers to be able to down. But I still don't know if that is such a big concern, because for one thing, if survivors are smart, they're not going to stick together and let you mark all of them together at the same time. And for 2, there's a lot of killers that well, we now have 2 other killers besides Ghostface that can also insta-down, regardless of whether or not they're marked. And you also have a lot of killers like Blight and Nurse who are probably better off just using their power anyway instead of trying to get an M1. So they're not going to really be able to benefit from the exposed. But if you didn't know, both killers can hit them when they're marked and insta-down them. So that is important to note. But I don't really like this. That's the only part of his, rework, if you want to call it that I don't like. But luckily it's just a temporary thing, so we'll see. Oni is another one that was physically painful for me to figure out the math. And Oni's, really, the math does not line up that much. So I did the best I can. This is what we're working with, guys. So increase the movement speed of Demon Dash by 15%. This is a direct one-to-one of the Aikido's crutch. That one was easy. Then the next one, decrease Demon Dash activation time by 10%. This is the scalped top knot. That's the closest thing I can get to. However, the scalped top knot normally reduces this by half of a second. So the time it takes, this is not referring to the time it takes for him to blow up and do his little scream where you can see his hands getting all veiny before your power is activated. This is not referring to that time. This is referring to the amount of time it takes to actually pull up your club, charge that dash, and then go run across the map, which takes 2 seconds. So instead of 2 seconds, this now takes 1.8 seconds. However, the Scalp's Top Knot add-on actually reduces this by 0.5, so it goes from 2 seconds to 1.5 seconds to charge. So this is a much weaker version of that. It's less than half of the effect. So it still takes 1.8 seconds to charge it, so it's not that much. And then speaking of not that much, the next part, increased rate the power gauge fills by 15%, is even less noticeable. So the closest thing to this is the Polis Midate, and normally that reduces this by 50%, or increases it by 50%, and in this mode it only does 15. So it's really not even noticeable at all. If you know in the base game it's already pretty trash. Normally your power passively charges 0.2 charges per second, and so even with the 50% faster add-on, it only goes up to like 0.3 seconds, I think. So 0.2 charges per second or 0.3 charges per second, it's still terrible. And so with 15%, that's only 0.203 charges per second. It's barely anything. Like, why even bother? They threw this in there to make it look like they gave Oni all these buffs. And then as you play him, you realize he really isn't much different. The only thing he really got is the movement speed, which is nice. The next part, increased range in which the blood orbs are collected. That is also not a direct result of any add-on. That's slightly different, another like add-on rework, if you will. So he has 2 add-ons that affect blood orbs. One affects the speed that he collects them, and the other affects the range that he can see them, of the auras of the blood orbs. But he doesn't have anything to affect the range he can collect them. So I do like this, because you can actually like get kind of within the range, start pulling them, and start walking away, and keep a little bit of your mobility and kind of travel the blood orbs with you till you finally collect them. So that is nice. And then the last one is the turning speed of Demon Dash by 20%, which we also don't have a direct comparison to in an add-on. So that's also nice. I do like a couple of these, but it's just not all that worth it. Then perhaps the least buffed killer, or second to least after Legion, is Deathslinger. Deathslinger has a lot of utility in his kit. He's got add-ons to make his terror radius smaller. He's got add-ons to increase the deep wound timer. He's got add-on to insta-down, which obviously they're not going to add this in there, but he's got a lot of different things he can do with his add-ons depending on how you want to play. And all they gave us was reload time and reeling speed, and I don't know, it's just a little let down. The reload time I think is great. What I would have preferred to see instead of the reeling speed was maybe like the decreased time that you're stunned after they break free from the chain, or maybe even the miss cooldown. Reducing the miss cooldown would have been even better. That's one of the biggest things you do as Slinger is miss. I mean, even the good Slingers take ambitious shots and miss, so I would have liked to see that over reeling speed, because who really cares about reeling speed? Half the time you can get an injury without even reeling at all and just let the chain break and just get a far shot, and then you can at least get an injury and they still have to mend. So I don't know if reeling speed was worth it. But anyway, I'll give you the stats on it. The reeling speed is essentially both the Bayshore's Gold Tooth and the Snake Oil put together. Then the reload speed add-ons used to be better. This is the Warden's Keys and the Ammo Belt put together. However, the Warden's Keys on their own used to reduce this by half a second. They've since been nerfed for some reason, And so now it's both of these put together. I think it's 0.35 seconds for the Warden's Keys and 0.15 seconds for the ammo belt. So these two put together make the reload times. Those are both 1-to-1. I just don't feel like they're very impactful. Moving on to Blight. This isn't too crazy. This first one, increased rush speed by 1.3 meters a second. The best comparison I can give you, because he doesn't have any add-ons that solely affect the rush speed to this degree. 1.3 meters a second calculates out to exactly 15%, like on the dot. So it's 15% faster. The only way that you get 15% faster rushes from his add-ons are with the Blighted Crow. And this would be on the 5th rush, because that gives you 3% faster speed with every consecutive rush. So upon the 5th and final consecutive Blighted rush, you are 15% faster in your rush, and that is equivalent to this 1.3 meters per second. So just picture Blighted Crow on the 5th stack. The next one, increased slam duration by 0.75 seconds. This is referring to the amount of time that you have in between rushes. So you rush, your power's about to end, you slam into an object, and then the slam lasts a little longer, you take a little longer bouncing off, and you have more time to like turn around and aim before you lose your power again, or you use the next rush. So that's what this is referring to, and that is a 1-to-1 comparison of the Pustula Dust. And then the increased turn rate sensitivity by 0.2 is both of the Umbra Salts and the Plague Bile put together. So that's both of those together. Next up is Nemesis. And this one's a bit interesting. They changed the zombies a little bit, but not quite the way I would have liked. This first one here increases zombie line of sight to 18 meters and 226 degrees. When it's giving these stats in this line, it's referring to the field of view for the degrees, and then the line of sight is basically the detection range. It's listed differently in his add-ons, but from what I can infer, and because I use his add-ons a lot because I main Nemesis, I pretty much am making the decision in my own head that this is the same thing. So when you read line of sight, think detection range, how close survivors have to be actually be seen by a zombie. And then the degrees are just the field of view. How many degrees around the zombie can they see them if their back is turned? So normally the zombies have a detection range of 14 meters and a field of view of 95 degrees. So this is a pretty decent buff. The most closely associated thing this would be the admin wristband. The admin wristband adds 4 meters onto the zombie line of sight or detection range. So from 14 to 18, that checks out. However, it only adds, I think if you use both of the field of view upgrades together, it only gets you from 95 degrees to 125 degrees. So this is still 101 degrees field of view higher than what you would have with the zombies with both of their add-ons put together. So that buff is a lot bigger. The 18 meters is exactly the same as it would be with the admin bracelet. The other one is a lot bigger. The rest of these are all the same. Contaminated survivors are hindered for 3 seconds. This is just the liquor tongue. It adds 1 additional second instead of 2 when you first contaminate a survivor. And then the next 2 decrease zombie spawn time by 7.5 seconds and increase mutation rate from zombie kills by 175%. These are both thanks to the Tyrant Gore. The Tyrant Gore does both of these effects in one. And if it seems confusing, you just look at it like you normally get 1 mutation point from a zombie kill with your tentacle. So that add-on increases it by 0.75. So then when you kill a zombie, you're getting 1.75 mutation points from killing a zombie, or 175%. And Wesker, finally, is the most interesting, because if you notice, Wesker actually has no direct comparisons to any of his add-ons, and he's the only killer in this mode so far to have that be the case. So first of all, he gets 3 virulent bounce as opposed to 2. They did this with Nurse in the first round of 2v8 and gave her 3 blinks, and then they realized how broken that was, so they took it away, and then from the second time on, she's had 2, but they keep seemingly buffing her more and more for some reason. I don't know if it's because the maps are bigger or what, but I don't know. But I thought with last round of 2v8 being the first for Wesker, that this round, this would get taken away like it did with Nurse. But no, he still has 3 virulent bounds, and it's insane. And I actually have a short on my channel get like a cross map with this. It's kind of crazy. The next one decreases his time to perform a vault by half a second. He has no add-ons to manipulate his vault speed. He has an add-on that breaks pallets when he vaults them, which is an iridescent or a visceral, if you will, now. But nothing to affect vault speed. So I like this a lot. And then decrease the time to charge a bound by 0.25 seconds. He doesn't have anything like that. He has the egg that makes it makes him have a longer window until he can use the second bound before his power automatically cancels. And then he has the little cogwheel that lets him move faster in between bounds, but he doesn't have anything to actually charge it. This is referring to the time when he goes and he lifts up his hand and you see his little goo lift up and whatever. This is referring to that time right there, and so there's no add-on to manipulate that either. And then finally, it decreases bound cooldown when not hitting a survivor by 1 second. So the time that he kind of like resets and puts his goo away after his bounds, that time is decreased. So think of this like the add-ons that Nurse has to decrease her fatigue. This is essentially reducing the amount of time it takes to fatigue after he uses a bound. So this actually makes it really good to use for mobility, which you should be doing with an extra bound in 2v8, because you can really cover some better distance with 3 bounds. But yeah, none of these are a direct comparison to any of his add-ons, unlike Wesker's counterpart Killer Friends here. So I really like this, honestly. I wish that this was what they would have gone for with the other killers, because for one thing, I think it makes it more interesting, right? You're not playing like only the busted add-ons, like to make them stronger or whatever. And you're also, you know, relearning the killer a little bit, especially if you play like some of these killers a lot, like really often. And I play Wesker a decent amount after Nemesis, but I've been enjoying like kind of relearning him because he feels better, but he also feels different in a way. Like it's more beneficial than it normally is to like keep vaulting pallets and windows. Like you catch up after 1 or 2 pretty quickly. The charge time and the cooldown time are really nice for mobility. So he's got a lot of changes that are good and different, and I like that, because in this mode you take off the stress of really having to make a lot of decisions about your build and your killer and whatever, which I think is part of what makes it more fun. But it's nice to see a little bit of a change in some of the killers. Like some of these would have been nice to be a little bit different, which they went for that a little bit with like Ghostface and Oni a little bit. But I don't get why some other killers who really could have used the help, like Legion and Deathslinger, barely got anything, and then killers like Nurse got so much. So I don't know. You guys let me know what you think. That's my video on the skills or the add-ons, however you want to refer to them. But hopefully you guys can use this information to better understand what you're getting with each killer's kit in 2v8 mode, and use that to make more informed decisions on what kind of builds you want to use for your classes and with which killer and all that. And if you haven't watched the other video referring to the best and worst classes on each killer, you should go watch that too. It does not include Ghostface and Oni because they were not out yet, but I'll do another one on those probably the next iteration. But that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed watching. Leave a comment down below what you think each killer should have gotten for add-ons, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.